Everybody, and welcome to another episode of Words, Images, and Worlds. They're always exciting, always eager to talk with creators and collaborators that I enjoy. And on this episode, I'm joined by comics creator Sloane Leong. Sloane, may I call you Sloane? Is that okay?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And can I call you Jason?
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
Awesome.
You can call me whatever you like, but Jason seems to be what most people go with. So absolutely. I'm going to point out if you're enjoying the audio only, that's totally cool. But I'm talking with an avatar sort of picture of Sloane, and it's very, I gotta say, the leather jacket, the background, like I'm a little intimidated. I
Oh
gotta
yeah,
tell.
it's my fancy author photo. A few years outdated, but yeah, it's pretty nice. My friends took it of me. It's not bad.
I love it. I love it. Now, you and I have been put in touch by a fellow creator, but I actually knew of your work before the connection was made, and I knew A Map to the Sun. That
Oh,
was a
cool.
book that I checked out a few years ago. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I really enjoyed it and enjoy your visual style. So I'll have a few questions along the way about how you develop that. And maybe that's the place for us to start. Where does this, how do I put it? It's a unique visual style. There's a beauty to it. There's sort of an invitation to a really interesting visual landscape that you share. So how did you arrive at that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a combination of my own, like, of course, my inspirations, but then also just my preference for how I draw. So, like with A Map to the Sun, that was all done with like brush and ink.
Mhm.
And I think that it influenced the style a lot because it's just a lot different than, say, the precision you get with like a nib, which is my other kind of like weapon of choice. That's what Prism Stalker was drawn with.
Yes,
Um,
yeah.
but brushwork is more impressionistic. It's looser. It's a bit harder to control, at least for me. Um, and yeah, and then there's just like other things like the girls' body language, how they look, how they emote,
Mm.
was really important to me. Which is like not always true with some cartooning. I mean, like it's in the name itself. We're caricaturizing emotions, but for me, I really tried to get into the subtleties of how these characters act, into like tiny like ticks in their expression. But yeah, those are just some things I thought about when I was drawing maps.
Love it. Yeah. And it's interesting to connect your work in maps to Prison Stalker because there are similarities, there are differences. I mean, your voice definitely comes through in both of those and connects them. So it's a beautiful comparison.
No, thank you.
Mhm. You mentioned inspirations. Are there particular go-to inspiration voices for you or aspects of life that inspire you?
Yeah, I can like rattle off a few of my like kind of like the cornerstone influences of my work, like storytelling wise. I feel like Octavia Butler's work is really important for me. I really love like Lilith's Brood, like that Xenogenesis trilogy.
Hmm.
That is like both like conceptually and ideologically something that I think about a lot. Um, and then like on a stylistic level and storytelling level too, but like things like Akira or Battle Angel Alita, maybe like Tsutomu Nihei's Blame.
Hmm.
Those series were also very formative for me and continue to resonate with me. They're just incredibly unique, and there's really no one else that does what they do, um, in their style as well, both like story wise and art wise.
Love it.
Um, yeah, and then I guess for like Prism Stalker, more specifically, things like Cronenberg's work and his horror work specifically, and science
Yeah.
fiction work is really formative. And then stuff like Sailor Moon and like Revolutionary Girl Utena, also very very important for that work.
I love how you can sort of see shades of and parts of inspirations in work. And this is true for prose, but I think it's especially true for comics and visual work.
Mm.
But then there's also that sort of mixture that you take up, and it's your own voice sort of joining these voices that have inspired you, and creating something new out of that synthesis, I guess is kind of a way to put it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I definitely think I've digested it enough over the years. So some people are like, oh, like usually they can't like draw too direct of a connection, which I think is
Hmm.
good. I think that
Hmm.
is emblematic of like what happens when an artist isn't just like doing an homage, but they've kind of braided it into their work in a neater, like more sophisticated way. So that's what I try to do at least.
I love it, love it. You mentioned Octavia Butler, who seemed to find these areas of stories that have been told, but then bring a unique spin, or sort of a piece that sort of a new vision of something. So I'm curious about what comics allow you to do in the storytelling and in the stories that you want to share.
Yeah, like as opposed to other mediums.
Hmm.
I guess it's like I mean it really depends because I also work in prose. I write a lot of short fiction. I have like a prose novel that's on submission right now, and then of course I do like illustration and like whatever fine art, quote unquote, like paintings and stuff. So I guess it just depends. It's a control thing, I think. Like I did toy with the idea of having Prism Stalker be just a novel.
Hmm.
But there is like, language has limits. We only have so many words for like membrane, for like flesh and meat and bone.
Hmm. Right.
And it would be hard to convey, I think, the sort of like organic nature of the entire world of Prism Stalker, which is like this huge metropolis is literally made out of the substance, like the flesh of an alien like organism.
Hmm.
And that is kind of hard to it would be hard to remind the reader of that throughout the book without mentioning it constantly.
Right.
Whereas in Prism Stalker, I can draw like every page features this environment. You're not going to forget that you're in this alien landscape. Um, so it kind of just depends on the kind of on like the impact you want to leave on the reader. And and like sometimes, prose can like the reader can fill in those gaps. Like maybe they would imagine it like that. But to me, I would rather um kind of press on I guess that experience more through visuals and kind of
Yeah.
insist on that experience that I want to convey.
Mm.
Um so that's why I feel like I'm drawn to comics a lot because I can where prose alone like where language fails, I can add in visuals that make up for that lack and vice versa.
Was not aware of your prose work, so now I want to check that out.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I have a bunch of free short fiction all over like science fiction and fantasy magazines online. It's all listed on my website.
Nice, nice. I'll make sure to check that out, and I'll make sure to link your website as well when
Okay,
I
cool.
share this. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So let's talk Prism Stalker for just a moment. And you
Mhm.
have so there's work that I think came out in 2018. Um, in this, is it a series? Is that right, or is the book in 2023 sort of a revamp or revisit?
So it's actually the new book coming out is the second book in a trilogy. It was always intended to be a trilogy. It was just like the first book basically didn't get enough pre-orders and it was canceled before it even hit shelves. So I didn't really spend time, advertising it as as the first book in a trilogy. But yeah, this is the middle book and I have one more planned.
Nice, nice. And as someone who has checked out sort of the digital copy, the digital preview, I'll say it's also it's not a bad step into that world at all. You don't feel like you're missing like a first of anything, which is a
Oh,
nice
nice.
experience. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
I'm glad.
and it's a great world to step into, especially as somebody that enjoys. I love comics and I love prose and all sorts of things, but I like to see sort of a different take and a new
Mm.
approach and something unique. And so I think you accomplish that
Oh, thank you.
quite well. Yeah, yeah. And I'm also a fan of the science fiction genre as well. So it's nice to see that represented.
Awesome.
Yeah. I'm just sort of peering at my next question to make sure. Was there anything else about Prism Stalker and the visual journey that you wanted to make sure to share?
I was thinking about this question, and I feel like, I mean, this kind of also goes into your other question about what do I want to, what I hope to share about my work.
Mhm.
And I think I'm pretty reserved about sharing any like cliff notes or like themes or like underlying
Yeah.
um subject matter that either inspired it. I feel like I did that a lot with the first volume. Um, but I feel like now I just want people to have their own unique experiences with it.
Mhm.
And not that they can't seek out whatever interviews and, stuff that I've shared about it, but I feel like I feel like it's been like 4 years since the last volume. It's
Mhm.
just very personal to me, and as we get deeper into this trilogy, it is very thematically complicated for me, and for
Yeah.
others, like the most common review I get is that it's very like quote unquote cerebral or psychedelic or less
Mhm.
complimentary, confusing, and that's totally fine. It is not for everyone. And I guess I didn't necessarily go into this trying to create a very easily parsable story. To me,
Love that though.
this story is me grappling with something and I don't have answers.
Mhm.
And I am trying to deliver a plot, but it is not as important as, what the characters are dealing with, which mirrors stuff that I'm dealing with or people I know are dealing with. And you know, the big buzzwords of like the history of like colonization and imperialism and
Mhm.
um all those. I feel like I could say that, but it's like, what does that actually tangibly look like in a reader's experience? And it's
Right.
like, I could frame it like that and they could go in with those buzzwords in their head, but I kind of don't want to. I want to see I want to see what people get from it, going in by themselves. um
That,
yeah.
yeah, I actually really I appreciate that approach because I think even when writers sometimes have a certain idea in mind, there's always that interaction between the reader and the writer. And so something
Hmm.
new is created as a result of that. And your approach reminds me a lot of poetry in that, creatively you can capture something, but it doesn't have to mean one thing.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
I love that idea of you having sort of the meanings that you're associating and thinking through, and it means something to you, but then I as a reader can take it up. And there's a nice debatability to that. There's a nice
Hmm.
conversation that can happen where people can go, "Oh, well, what were you thinking at this part?" And it's
Hmm.
okay to have different answers. I actually really appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm so glad. Like, yeah, people have come to me with like so many different interpretations that are all to me equally fascinating and
Mhm.
not what I intended. But I'm like, that's as valuable as my experience with the work. To me, I've been able to like kind of lay this like, I've like tilled this imaginary soil and then you planted something in there. And then
Mhm.
together we grew an experience for you. And to me, that's like the most valuable part of art is just that, kind of passive collaborative experience and that uniqueness. Yeah.
And I mentioned A Map to the Sun being one of the first pieces of yours that I discovered, but you have other collaborations that have been part of your publishing history too. I'm going to mention Graven Eye. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Graven Eye?
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
So there are some published pieces out there for folks like me that want to go and read more because when I find something I appreciate, I always want to find everything the person has done. Um,
Yeah, same.
yeah. So any words about those collaborations or any directions that you'd want listeners to uh, sort of take in what to read and what you're most proud of in that part of your journey?
Yeah. Yeah, I love collaborating with artists and writers. Grave and I was the writer on it, and my friend Anna Bo drew it. She's an incredible illustrator and cartoonist. Um, Yeah, that I kind of like to work across genres. So this one is
Mhm.
straight horror. Kind of a fantastical element to it. The premise is it follows this woman who lives in this really, really old, kind of like Frankenstein patchworked house. And the story is told from the perspective of this house as if it was alive.
Mm.
And this house is observing its owner. Her name is Isla, and the maid that she hires. And they kind of have a weird, there's like a psychological kind of dark romance between them that the house is observing, kind of as like an almost like a. I've gotten the like impression that it's very alien, which was my
Mm.
intent. That's a big thing that I like to play with is alien perspectives.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
this house is constantly relating to these humans in its like walls, kind of as like a house basically. And yeah, it was just really fun to work on that with her. It's a standalone graphic novel. Um, Not suitable for kids, not like maps, but
Right, right.
um yeah, I had a lot of fun doing that.
And maps is more, if you have something that's more grounded, I would say, as like a slice of life, sort of like coming of age
Hmm.
sort of story. That's probably the one that strikes me most in that way.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely the most accessible to a white like a general audience. It's like set in contemporary sort of times,
mhm,
slice of life. The premise for that is just five kind of delinquent schoolgirls are forced to join their school's basketball team,
mhm,
or
mhm,
else get expelled. So it just kind of follows their like a year of school as they go through like basketball season and build up friendships and rivalries and kind of just live life. Yeah.
and it's I saw basketball as part of the description when I first pre-ordered it, which was a couple of years ago now. And I'm
Hmm.
not a sports person, but I thought, well, there's some interesting work going on here. And so I mean, basketball happens to be part of it, but you do such interesting character work there. And the times when, as a young person, you start to question like authority and older people start to disappoint you, and
Hmm.
all of those sort of things come through really, really well in that book.
Oh, I'm so glad. Yeah, it's such a narratively like ripe time in life, and it was very cathartic to go back and just visit and like kind of revisit all those school era memories and try and get those experiences on the page. But I'm glad that that came through.
Yeah, yeah. So Prism Stalker Part 3, where can you talk about where that is in development? Is that at the scripting stage or anything
Yeah.
like that?
Oh yeah, totally. It's definitely, well, the whole thing has basically been written. I wrote it, I wrote the entirety of the series when the first book came out back in like 2017, 2018. I went through revisions again last year when I was working on book two, but most of it is still the same. So I'm anticipating maybe in the next 3 or 4 years, because I have two more books that I'm going to be that I'm booked for releasing in the next 2 years. So it's kind
Oh,
of like
wow.
third on the slate right now, but I'd like to hopefully work on it simultaneously and get it out at least within the next 3 years if I can.
Love the productivity. Love that.
Yeah.
And I also love, readers can go back, check out the first book. They could step into the second book if that's the first step they want to take. And as I said,
Hmm.
I totally enjoyed it from that perspective, and something to look forward to in the series as well, which is wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm glad the second book worked for you. It's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. Um, it reminded me of a book called Grip, I think, and I can't remember who did that book, but I thought
Hmm.
about that. But then I also thought you're bringing this unique vision and all of these pieces, and so I highly recommend it. And I don't know, confusing. I don't know that I would say that, but I think it's interesting, engaging, and definitely something to visit and revisit. Anything that we've talked about or anything we've not talked about before I ask about upcoming work, events, anything that you want to point readers to sort of close out? Anything that we've missed?
Not that I can think of. Yeah, I just hope people have a good experience with this book. And I don't know, I feel like the kind of work I want to put out, like Prism Stalker, which is a little bit more of a something you have to a little like grapple with to
Hmm. Hmm.
engage with. It's not, like I said, it's not very clear. There's not like very obvious plot points, I think, or at least that's been my impression so far. Um, but yeah, some of your questions were making me just think about the general atmosphere of readership right now. And I feel like it's, people reward like speed and clarity. They reward like, or I should say they are primed to enjoy things that are easily taxonomized. So like tropes. People love tropes. And
Right.
like, people love to they love deep lore that they can reference and make sure that everything is like canon.
Hmm.
And I feel like those things are kind of at odds with me artistically and philosophically.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so yeah, I just hope people are able to, fight against those urges to just kind of categorize and instead trying and just engage with it. Like it sounds like you have totally, just in your own way. That's all I can ask, really.
Yeah, yeah. But I'm working on a piece right now because I write about reading from time to time, and it's
Hmm.
it's about that dynamic of like, um, and it's open access. It's a blog kind of thing, but it's
Hmm.
about that dynamic between sort of reading quickly and the speed of reading, but also slowing down and taking something in. And so I think there's definitely a place for that, and I think there's definitely a beauty in that. That if readers are just sort of rushing through, especially something like a visual graphic novel sort of book,
Hmm.
there is beauty in slowing down and grappling with something. And I liken it in some ways to like taking in something at an art gallery. Yeah, you can walk through the room really quickly and get a quick sense and maybe walk away with sort of a skimmed overview of what's in that room, but it's
Hmm.
only when you walk by and pause and take the time and reflect and then go to the next piece and pause and reflect, that you really kind of take in what's there, I think. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
So anything you mentioned the website, I'll make sure to link that. You said you have two other projects in development. Prism Stalker is out soon, right? 2023, is that?
Yeah, actually, so it was supposed to come out in July, but our distributor, which is Penguin Random House, they're kind of delaying books to make sure they're not late from the
Ah,
printer. So now it's coming out August 1st, which
so
is a bummer,
August
but
1st.
it's not too far away. So yeah.
Yeah, great. So looking forward to seeing that out in the world, and I'll make sure to drop an Amazon review on there as well since I've read it. And yeah, anything that you would like to share about, we have that on August 1st, Prism Stalker
Mhm.
Book 2. Anything that you want to share about the upcoming projects, or are we in NDA um, territory that's like we cannot say things, but there are books.
Yes, I cannot say anything yet. They're still in negotiations, contractual negotiations, so I don't want to jinx anything. But yeah, the two graphic novels I can say, one is like another horror themed collection that I'll be drawing, and then the other one is another slice of life one that I'll be collaborating on as a writer.
Wonderful, wonderful things to look forward to.
Yes.
Wonderful work that's already been published as well.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah,
And
thank
I guess
you.
if it's cool, I will shout out the Cartoonist Cooperative.
By all
Um,
means.
Yay. It's a organization I co-founded with other cartoonists. And it basically aims to kind of make our practice as cartoonists and comics workers more sustainable and successful. We want to develop or we have developed a pretty, wide ranging virtual community on Discord and a forum. And some of our goals for the future are basically to like set industry standards for livable pay rates, basically, because all comics workers are freelancers, which is very difficult
Mhm.
to be. And then basically just continually, challenge like unfair business practices in the industry. So this is something we've been working on for the last 4 months, and I think we're almost at 600 members now.
Great, great, and glad to link to that space. Glad to share about it. Glad to have
Yay.
anyone on from the group. So and very timely in that we've just had the hashtag comics broke me. I think
Yes.
that was last week. So
Hmm.
there's definitely I appreciate the advocacy and love that you're exploring that and finding ways to advocate for yourself and other professionals in the industry.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate you letting me talk about it a little.
Anytime, anytime. We can dedicate a whole episode to it. That's
Oh,
absolutely fine.
amazing.
Yeah.
I might take you up on that then.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm serious too. So yeah, by all means. Um, well, Sloan, thank you for a wonderful conversation. I'll make sure to share this back around with you and hope to talk again soon.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Jason.